Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the House Judiciary Committee, my colleagues, the late Daniel Patrick Moynihan of New York left us a rich legacy of precious insights, and one insight is particularly valuable, even instructive for this conversation. Moynihan famously said that the central conservative truth is that it is culture, not politics, that determines the success or failure of a society. The central liberal truth is that politics can change a culture and save it from itself. We are at one of those watershed moments when politics needs to gently nudge culture forward. America is a splendid work in progress, and what we do here today is part of that splendid progress. During the last 9 years, I've participated in this debate from my seat on this committee, and I'd like to say something to my colleagues. The House Judiciary Committee has played a critical role, an indispensable role, in shepherding this sensitive question to this historic day. The House Judiciary Committee has defended and held the high ground in this debate. What is the high ground? This committee has refused to be stampeded by unreason and impatience. It has insisted on proof. Extremes of any kind have never found a comfortable home in this committee. The committee has refused to lurch to the far left or the far right. This committee has beaten back attempts to enshrine a prohibition on same-sex marriage in the Maryland Constitution. It has also been cautious about leaping ahead of public opinion. The committee has been guided by Lincoln's admonition that with public opinion, everything is possible, and without it, nothing is possible. This is how I see the merits of the question before us. The most important arguments made against same-sex marriage are not, for me, rooted in fact or my experience. The opponents will state that the introduction of same-sex marriage in Maryland will cheapen the institution of marriage and discourage procreation. Yet there is no evidence that same-sex marriage will undermine the institution of marriage or the survival of our species. I've been married for 40 years. My decision, indeed my wife's decision to get married and to stay married, had nothing to do with the existence or non-existence of gay and lesbian marriage. I do not know of any couple who got divorced or refused to get married because of the existence or non-existence of same-sex marriage. In 35 years of practicing law, no one came into my office and declared, I want to get a divorce because gays and lesbians want to get married. Of course, in all fairness, perhaps I have not represented enough Eastern Shore Republicans. I say that to my good friend and colleague, Delegate Spiegel. What of the claim that authorizing same-sex marriage will discourage or interfere with procreation among heterosexuals? This is truly the triumph of fancy over fact. I don't know a single heterosexual who has said that he will refuse to procreate if gays and lesbians have the right to marry. One of the extraordinary things, I believe, that's often overlooked in our debate over same-sex marriage is how many conservatives have found common ground and made common cause with liberals and moderates in support of same-sex marriage. The legendary father of political conservatism, Senator Barry Goldwater, was a fierce libertarian out of the American West. He was not sentimental about protecting cultural prejudice. He was sentimental about protecting Americans and American freedoms. He put it best when he said, you don't need to be straight to fight and die for your country, you just need to shoot straight. Goldwater didn't cast the issue of same-sex marriage in terms of equality. It was all about defending Americans, all Americans, from the whims of unrestrained government and the arbitrary majority. And when asked why he supported gay rights, Senator Goldwater said simply, because they're Americans. This brings me to the parable of Vice President and Mrs. Cheney. and what we can learn from their experience. Their daughter Mary is a lesbian, and the Vice President and his wife Lynn Cheney support same-sex marriage. The Vice President is a conservative icon, and Lynn Cheney is a staunch conservative. Their support of same-sex marriage has been unfairly dismissed by opponents because their daughter is gay. But this distorts cause and effect. Vice President Cheney does not support same-sex marriage because he has a gay daughter. He supports same-sex marriage because what he has learned about gays and lesbians from his daughter. Mr. and Mrs. Cheney resolved that enough is enough and decided to join the swelling ranks of Americans who are no longer willing to turn a blind eye to blind prejudice. Now, in the secular world, that which is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. But how can we address the celestial arguments of the opponents of same-sex marriage who truly believe that they can decipher, translate, and represent the position of God on the question of same-sex marriage? Mr. Chairman, I have checked the witness list, and God has not signed up either for or against the bill. There are some things, Mr. Chairman, there are some things in life that are unknowable. And so to my colleagues who believe that God is on their side, I ask the committee to carefully weigh the meditation of President Lincoln. During a very dark moment in the Civil War when Union forces were in full retreat, Lincoln was visited at the White House by a minister who assured our devastated president that God was on the side of the Union. Lincoln fell silent. And he reflected, and he reflected, and he finally answered the minister. I am not so much worried whether or not God is on our side. What worries me is whether or not we are on God's side. I doubt that much progress will be made today to change the minds of opponents of same-sex marriage. Minds are made up, and well, they should be at this point. But perhaps something very valuable can yet be wrung out of these proceedings if fewer and fewer of us continue to believe that God is on our side and more of us worry, as did Lincoln, whether or not we are on God's side. I, for one, remain cautiously optimistic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, my colleagues on the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.